All right, everybody. Welcome to the Faculty Research Forum. My name is Eva Maria Suarez, and I'm the chair of the committee. It is our pleasure to present today to you our speaker, Dr. David Hixson. He is and has been for quite some time, I understand, adjunct professor and professor of geography and anthropology at Shepherd and at Hood College as well. He specializes, as many of you probably know, in archaeological remote sensing, the use of technology to detect, visualize, and analyze archaeological objects and landscapes. And today he will talk about that. He will share with us some recent work on different methodologies under the title of Unreal Archaeology, combining aerial drones, digital animation, and dirt archaeology to recreate ancient landscapes. He will later on be joined by a colleague of his, Jeffrey Vadala from the College of New Jersey. Welcome and thank you.
We can't hear you, David.
How's that? Better? All right, very good. So yeah, I've been at Shepherd for almost a decade since I moved here, and it's been an absolute delight teaching at Shepherd. I want to bring up a couple of points before I get into the meat of my talk. First of all, I want to mention that this work is dedicated to the descendant communities of the people that I work with, the Hacienda Chunchukmil in Yucatan, and of the enslaved peoples of Belle Plantation. Both populations, unfortunately, went through a historic period of enslavement. In fact, the people that I work with in Yucatan, the elders of that community whom I work with, actually remember being enslaved, and we had lengthy discussions about that. And we really have focused our research on giving back to the descendant populations of both projects that I'll be discussing today. Unfortunately, at Belle Grove, as you can see, what we have right now are only a list of names, and together with the sister project at Montpelier, we are working at trying to find out more about the descendant communities of Belle Grove. I also want to dedicate this to a former Shepherd University adjunct professor, Bruce Dolan. He is the reason why I am even here in West Virginia, and the reason why I ended up studying it in Yucatan. He's a longtime resident of Shepherdstown, lived over on Turner Road. And this is one of the photos from on the wall, right? The wall in front of the campus. This is one of Hallie Taylor's photos of Bruce Dolan, who passed away a few years ago. So this is also dedicated to Bruce, who really had this mindset of giving back to the communities that we work with. All right, a little bit on my research. I joined Bruce Dolan's project in 1999, and we worked in the village of Chunchukmil. It's located in northwest Yucatan, and it's about 30 kilometers from the coast. You can see here, it's the intervening area between the coast and Chunchukmil is wetlands. And it was my task for my dissertation to map these wetlands using satellite imagery, synthetic aperture radar, and good old-fashioned, gumshoe archaeology. The environment around Chunchukmil is a critical element to this entire story. It is despite what you might think of as Yucatan as being kind of in the semi-tropics, this is actually semi-desertic. It has one of the lowest rainfall totals in all of Mesoamerica, with a very pronounced dry season and a very rocky, barren look during the dry season. Of course, during the rainy season, it will liven up briefly. And it's that time between the rainy season and the dry season that I had a lot of success using synthetic aperture radar and multispectral imagery, locating ancient Maya sites in the wetlands between Chinchicmil and the coast. The environment is also highly dictated by topography. So the topography around Chinchicmil is almost completely flat. It's one of the flattest landscapes that you'll ever see. And I grew up in central Illinois. So this landscape has almost a 0-degree incline. And when the rains come, they essentially fill up the underground aquifer and meet the surface. So any depressions fill in with water, and any topographic rises are high and dry. And the only topographic rises in this area are ancient Maya architecture. So it's a good indication, again, a good use of remote sensing to detect high and dry as opposed to low and wet. We spent almost a decade mapping. In the end, we mapped 9.3 square kilometers of the site center. And what you're seeing here is the kind of GIS version of that 9.3 square kilometers. We then, Scott Hudson then directed 4 additional transects totaling 11.6 square kilometers that we mapped entirely by hand. Because if you think about it, if every little topographic rise is an ancient Maya mound, then one way to map things is to map every bump that you can encounter while walking over the landscape. So we drew physically on graph paper every structure by hand using a pace and compass method. This took us approximately 10 years. Seasonally, of course, using a whole team of mappers from 1996 to 2006. This was, if anybody's interested, this entire work directed by Bruce Dolan was put together and edited by Scott Hudson. I have a couple chapters in it. And we, again, in the vein of open sharing of data, we have put it up for free. You can download the entire monograph at University of Press of Colorado, including our maps. And you can see, this is what we drew. This is what we ended up having to pace and compass every single structure there. And that's just one section of the map. As you can see at the bottom, it says this will connect up with block 6. If everybody could please mute their microphones, I would appreciate it. But the problem is that we had done all this work drawing all of these little structures. And you can see here what we have are ancient alboradas, which are boundary walls between house lots, little platforms for residential structures, oval outlines of your traditional Maya apsidal houses. So what we have are house lots and yards delineated by these stone walls or alboradas, and little depressions where they did their quarrying, and often those would fill in with water during the rainy season. This is a great map, and I spent a lot of time working with Bruce and Scott, mapping both the site center and the outskirts of the city. However, in these lengthy field seasons, I wasn't really much of a gamer, but I did have one video game with me, Unreal Tournament, and it came with an editor. And I was fascinated by this editor because it allowed you to create 3D worlds within the Unreal Tournament environment. And I realized that all of these drawings that we had created would work really well being sketched up. That's actually the concept behind the software SketchUp. is that you take a flat map, you take the buildings, and you build them up into a 3D model. I did that, but I did it in Unreal, which again is a software package that the Epic Games released for free, so that anybody could make their own worlds. I took a segment of ancient Chunchik Meal, a part that we were excavating in 1999, and I sketched it up in Unreal Tournament. This is using the Unreal 2 editor. And it was fascinating. I had to make all of these decisions about what type of surfaces would be in each area. Are we talking about stucco plazas? Where were the staircases? Were there any ornamentations on the roofs? I have to provide different textures for, say, the roads versus the plazas versus the open spaces. And what about going inside? If you're going to create something where somebody can actually walk up to and even into each building, what are you going to put on the inside when honestly what we had were rubble mounds of architecture? And so there were a lot of epistemological questions involved in this, in modeling both the cultural and the natural environment here. For instance, I helped excavate this range structure to the side of one of the pyramids in Chunchik Meal. And when we were done, we really did not know whether there was ever a superstructure on top of it. It seemed to be a platform for something. No post molds, but a foundation. So I had to make a decision. What do I put on top of that foundation? And I decided to put a wattle and daub structure with a thatched roof. These types of decisions had to be made over and over in adding such detail that really we could not observe as mappers. Because again, you were going to create something that somebody could walk right up to, and we're recreating this landscape. So I want to encourage any educators out there to listen to your students. If they seem to be one of those gamers who likes to put worlds together, maybe does a lot in Minecraft, which the grayed out image in the back of this image is actually Teotihuacan in Minecraft, done for a museum. Have your students work on creating a 3D model of a known site, working from the archaeological data. There's so much to be learned as the author of this type of data. What was found archaeologically? What is contemporaneous? Right? We need, in that Chunchik Meal map, we have both early and late classic. Do I want to conflate those, or should I really filter out the early from the late classics so that I'm showing only one phase of the archaeological site? Vegetation and the environment. You should not just throw in any old trees. Study the vegetation of the area and import the proper vegetation for that region. And then, of course, there is the question of just what might have been. As an archaeologist, we're always coming up with, well, our best approximation of what happened in this plaza would have been a gathering of a particular lineage group. Well, let's represent that and see what you can do with this 3D modeling software that you can't do with your 2D maps and honestly just a textual discussion of an archaeological site. So this was my first foray, and I called it Unreal Chunchik Meal, my first foray into recreating an ancient landscape. But that was really more for illustration, right? It's along the lines of Proskuryakov or others who wanted to know what these archaeological sites looked like at their heyday. That was what that Unreal Chunchik Meal Mach 1 was all about. But I wanted to use it for research. I wanted to actually detect and analyze these 3D models using measured data from the archaeological sites themselves. The previous one went through many iterations, right? We first hand drew the maps, then we scanned them and we digitized them, and then I brought them into Unreal, then I sketched them up. There's a lot of translation going on there. I wanted to work with the original data. And the way to do that is to acquire digital, topographic, and photographic data of the archaeological site itself. To do this, I decided that drone photogrammetry was really the way to go. So you guys know what a drone is, a unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV. And photogrammetry is the process of taking data directly, measurable data directly from photographs. In this case, stereoscopic pairs of photographs compared. I had a crackerjack team of my father and a undergrad from Frederick Community College joined me on this project. Now, as you can imagine, the dry season at Chumchikmeel, everything is brown. And you're looking at brown on brown with rocks being the architecture and rocky ground being the ground. So the contrast is extremely low. An actual photograph tells you very little at Chumchikmeel. It's hard to see the architecture through all the noise of the underbrush, even though there's very little vegetation there. But with a computer, it can replicate what your eyes do. By taking stereoscopic pairs, it can compare the right and left and find out what is foreground, what is background, what is the actual surface of the earth, and what is the vegetation above it. For those of you not familiar with this concept, photogrammetry essentially, it's been around for a long time. Those old stereoscopes where you put two images in it. And our eyes have been able to do this, you know, evolutionarily since our beginning. Only recently have computers caught up to the point where they can replicate what our brain does so quickly and so naturally. If any of you want to try this, you're at home, your cameras are probably not on, so you're not going to look stupid. If you put your fist halfway between your face and the computer, and you just close one eye, and then close the other eye, and you go camera one, camera two, camera one, camera two, you see the difference of your computer screen in the background moving in relation to your hand. That is essentially what your brain is processing into 3D eyesight. A computer can take thousands of these images and note the difference between one view and another and use trigonometry to extrapolate the angle that you are looking at an object and how far away it is from it. So these brown featureless photographs actually reveal what they are, which are mounds, for instance, right here of the ball court and the tallest pyramid. Although it would be difficult to pick that out even if you were on the ground there in Chinchilla. The equipment, I prefer to use off-the-shelf equipment. Since the end of our large National Geographic sponsored project with Bruce Dolan, I've been working fairly independently and with smaller budgets. So I use purposefully, in this case, this is a $500 drone. You buy a couple batteries and a backpack, it comes out to about $1,000. And then you can use this for any number of projects. This particular one has a 12.4 megapixel sensor on it that is now considered low. If you bought something equivalent today, it would have a 20 megapixel camera, in which case everything that you see in this project would actually be of a slightly higher resolution and higher quality than I am even presenting to you today, still at that $1,000 price point. So while I was there, I videotaped a little bit of my actual flights and discussed this on a video that is available on, let me get it to work. That is available on YouTube if you want to watch the entire one. I'll just show you a little clip that shows me actually in front of one of the pyramids discussing the flights. Come on, there we go.
So what I'm testing is the capability of an aerial drone to do the work that we did in a decade in possibly, a few weeks. So we're flying a DJI Phantom 3 Advanced at about 40 meters over the entire site center. We're going to model it using a program called Altager to create a 3D model of the site center.
All right, so you can see this is a very barren landscape. You can see that in the lower right corner is a late classic platform. In the distance in the back left are the pyramids, but again, very difficult to see from just plain photography or even moving pictures. So this drone survey was done in 1 week, and I focused on the area with the largest architecture, the site center with the majority of the pyramids. So each of those red zones in the left-hand map here are quadrangle groups, where you have a pyramid and an enclosed patio about the size of a small city block. Each of those connected to the others via these causeways or ancient Maya roads. And you can see the footprint of my drone survey. This is a little bit under 1 square kilometer done in 1 week. And it took about 16,000 photos. The method for doing this is you run one transect over the entire area in orthophoto mode, nadir looking straight down, and then you run 4 more transects, each one looking inward, one from the east, one from the west, one from the north, one from the south, looking inward at about a 45-degree angle. So that way you're covering every square foot of this landscape from every direction. And what that does is you feed all of that into a computer program, and it aligns the images and figures out exactly where each photograph was taken from, and does that trigonometry of figuring out where, how far an object is from the camera and at what angle, creating what we call a point cloud. Initially, it's a sparse point cloud. It's just lining up all the cameras, and that's what you see right here. So all of these dots on the bottom are just general points where the photographs, neighboring photographs intersect. And all of the images above, all of those rectangles, those are the camera positions. The next thing the software has to do is you create a dense point cloud, which gets a lot more points to it. And then it has to figure out which point connects to which point to make a logical surface out of all of these, this point cloud. And this is the tricky part for most software because it's guessing. This is kind of AI at work. It's trying to figure out what surfaces, what dots connect to what dots to create a natural surface. And these often have to be edited, but in a sense, what this is creating is a wire mesh that then you can drape a lot of texture or tone or color on top of. which is the next step. You replace the textures, and in this case, when we say textures, we're not talking about feeling something bumpy. We're talking about adding color and tone and something that gives it a feel back to that wireframe mesh. Now, as you can see, it's still brown on brown. And so making it look like the original photographs actually doesn't help very much at Chunchikmil. So this is the 3D model. And it looks very much like a aerial photograph. But if you strip that away and instead texture it with just a shaded relief, then you actually are getting at the digital elevation model generated by the drone and the computer processing this photogrammetry. And so with very little money and only spending a week there, I was able to create a digital elevation model equivalent to or better than any LiDAR that is ongoing right now. And you can see the arrows there are pointing to a defensive wall that goes around the site center. And we're detecting all of the large pyramid quadrangle groups. And we're even picking up those little alvaradas, the little lines of stones outlining individual solares, or the house lots of this community. I'm gonna go to this only. And so this is just a quick fly through of the data. So this is the 3D model. Again, fairly useless with all of the textures on it, but underlying all of this data is the digital elevation model. And I would encourage you to check out the original one created by Altager. I used a program called Altager at first. It's a cloud processing company that did all of this alignment and cloud processing for me before I had the capabilities to do it myself. Unfortunately, they have gone under. The coronavirus hit them hard, and the company has decided to go in a different direction. So if you want to see this model, it is being hosted live for the next 10 days. It's been hosted for the last 3 years, but it's gonna be taken down in the next 10 days. So you can go to altager.com and search for Chunchikmil, and you'll see this model to explore. So since Altager is going away, I realized I could do better. I could process this myself, and I could do the detection, and I could even remove a lot of that vegetation and a lot of the noise, have a lot more control over the data if I processed it myself. So this brought me full circle back to the Unreal Engine, and I call this next work Unreal Chunchikmil 2.0. I took the segments that I flew. By the way, the drone works best when you're flying in certain chunks. I found about a 250 meter by 250 meter chunk was really nice to work with at the time. And so that took up like 3 batteries of flying time. And then back at the lab, about 250 meters by 250 meters is about the right number of photos that my computer liked to process. So about 1/8 of a hectare per process. So this block right here is about that. And you can see me editing the trees right here. Let me go full screen on that for you.
In Oculus Medium, and I have imported my,
sorry, I want to pause 1 second and point out that my editing, by the way, of removing vegetation is done by hand in VR, because I realized that I eventually want to put these into first-person view, so I want to be able to edit this to the point where you can get up close and personal with the data. So I edited the point clouds in, actually the wireframe meshes in Oculus Medium, which is now by Adobe. And so you can see me actually removing each piece of vegetation.
And I have imported my Chunchukmil 3D model block 1, which has the largest temple and the ball court here. But this still has all of the vegetation on it. This is what was imported from Reality Capture. And in other programs, what you might do is use an automated algorithm to remove vegetation and all of these extra blobs that have been left behind by trees and shrubs. But I find that that removes too much of the other data of these nice bumpy rocks. Certain stones get smoothed over if you do an automated smoothing, or if you do automated removal of certain triangles, then you would lose some of the detail that is in this model. So I like to go in and hand edit the model. And what I really like about this is that it is so much like actually going in and clearing the forest. You can use various brushes. I like to use the smooth tool set on certain settings for the smooth tool. And because I know this site, I know which of these blobs are vegetation, which ones might be stone. And so I know, having looked at a lot of this remote sensing data, that that's a tree stump. And actually, those trees are causing those little loose bits here. So this is essentially virtual wilderness gardening. And we're going to take out all the vegetation by hand. You can do it up close like this, or you can do very large areas and quickly smooth it over using a large brush.
So, let me get to the next slide here. This is what we end up with. It's not been completely cleaned, but these are the various survey blocks with the majority of vegetation removed, but all of the stones left in place. If I had done an automated smoothing of this entire model, what would have happened was that you would have had to rely on the textures, the photographs, to give any of this roughness to it. Whereas I like to leave the roughness in the model because the roughness is indicating stones. And so this is where each stone, you're literally seeing a bump where every stone is on the site center of Chunchukmil. And you can clearly see all of the patios, pyramids, the defensive wall going around the edge there, the sock bays connecting each group with the other, as well as some, we have some historic features that are showing up from the ranching days when there was a cattle ranch there. The near side here hasn't been cleaned yet, so there are some sections that still have the vegetation that needs to be removed. And you can see the difference between, say, this section here and this section here. Oop. Additionally, again, remember, this can be textured with photographs, but I'm using just the shaded relief right now because it's so much more interesting for Chunchukmil. And because the architecture is respecting the topography, we can also add water to the scene and see what depressions would have filled with water during the rainy season, thus finding seasonal water sources within Chunchukmil. If you add the textures back on, then this is what you get. And you really can see every stone. Each little mound is visible. The water in the background, by the way, is artificial. Remember, I'm just using that to fill in the depressions. But you can really see every stone, every albarada, every stone fence. Here's the modern road that cuts through the middle. and the depressions that are seasonal water sources. And then here it is imported all the way into Unreal. So instead of me drawing the polygons by hand, indicating where a structure was that we mapped by hand and drew, this is the original data. This is actually the data from the drone, interpreted by my software and imported into Unreal, now in version 4, Unreal 4. I'm using a particular program called Twinmotion to access the Unreal engine, and I'll show you a little bit more about that next time. Notice that, for instance, if I had done an automatic smoothing, we probably would have lost that little altar that is right there on the top, indicating that this, again, did not have a superstructure, but that this was a platform with an open altar there. And since we're already in Unreal, let's add some trees. Let's add some grass so that people can really feel like they are experiencing the site as an archaeologist would. Going in, and you can truly survey downtown Chunchikmil as if you were an archaeologist walking over each area. And a quick side note, in my archaeology, we always have a debate about people always put in too much vegetation into their reconstruction drawings. These sites were urban. These sites weren't covered in vegetation like they are today. I want to make a quick point that often people like me, archaeological illustrators, we will add vegetation when there is something that is either poorly known or completely unknown. It's almost like the little lines of grass that we put on top of our profile drawings to indicate the surface of the earth. We add these not so much to, we add this vegetation not so much as a cop-out, but to say, hey, don't trust this area right here. If you see vegetation there, that means I probably erased vegetation there. So you're not really seeing the ground surface. I put vegetation back where I took vegetation away. So it's another indication, a little key, telling you don't completely trust the pixels underneath this grass. And finally, of course, what if we turned this unreconstructed site into a tourist attraction? How many tourists could walk around this area? And so I could throw in non-playable characters, have them walk around in paths, and see what the circulation might be like for tourists visiting the archaeological site. Now, that was just my test run. I would love to come back and get both more photogrammetry and LiDAR from the entire Chunchikmil region. That's going to have to wait for another big grant and a time where I can leave the country again. But during the pandemic, I at least have my digital elevation model that I can still do some more cleaning on, and I still want to make this available to the public. In the meantime, though, I have this other wonderful project, which is Belle Plantation. At Hood, we did a field school there in 2018 and 2019 with site archaeologist Matthew Greer and his assistant director, Erica Moses. And they are studying the enslaved population at Belle Grove. So we were there participating in his excavations where we uncovered some of the slave cabins that once existed on the landscape and helped him interpret some of the landscape using my drone imagery. So if you go to Belle Grove, I highly encourage you to do so. It's a beautiful place, but it has seen tremendous changes over the decades. And in the 20th century, a lot of what was once indicative of a working plantation, including the people who lived and worked and were enslaved upon that plantation, that was slowly erased over time as this landscape transitioned into being a a hotel for a little bit or a bed and breakfast, and then eventually a museum, National Historic Site. The outbuildings, the shacks, the cabins, they get knocked down over time. And now the hub that once was the activity area for Belle Grove is kind of just a side yard now, a pasture where you have overflow parking and some hay being so along with the sister plantation Montpelier, James Madison's Montpelier, Belle Grove has decided to bring the enslaved population back to the public view. Montpelier is really a pioneer in this, and the two plantations are literally sister projects because James Madison's sister-in-law was at Belle Grove. So we actually might be able to trace some of the enslaved men and women who were living at Belle Grove back to purchases or even DNA that's being worked at over at Montpelier. Here is Belle Grove today, my first preliminary drone flyover. You can see that there is this dichotomy between the front lawn, which would be kept, you know, the very front's going to be agricultural, and then inside the fence, you've got the reception area where people would be coming in on their carriage. And then you'll see back off to the side, as we curl around, this field over here was the hub of production, or at least for, you had barns, outbuildings, cabins, blacksmith shops. And today is just kind of a side yard to the manor house. This is where Matt Greer has focused most of his work. You can see I flew my drone using various grid patterns at different elevations, including looking straight down, doing that 45-degree push broom, as well as some radial circles around some of the architecture. That forms the base of my map. And for most of you, if you wanted to, that's all you would need. About 1,000 photographs from above, from various angles, and you've got a wonderful orthographic, properly measured out map of your site. I added then another 6,000 terrestrial photographs from the ground because I knew I wanted people to walk right up to these structures and be able to see the texture. So with now about 10,000 images, it took quite a while to make all those align. And it's very tricky to get drone images to then align with something that is actually inside something else. You have to go under a roof and inside. So I'm still working on all of that. You are seeing some very preliminary outputs of our current efforts. And again, I'm doing my editing in VR. So when the software does have troubles matching, say, drone imagery with inside, oftentimes what happens is like the width of a board is only, you know, less than an inch. And so if this drone imagery and the terrestrial imagery are just misaligned by less than an inch, you'll get these holes in the roof that you see through. Well, in VR, I can use Adobe Medium, and I can, almost like using Bondo, right? You fill it in with this spackle, and then you smooth it over. So essentially you can spackle over your holes. And if there are any misshapen forms in there, you can reshape them because all of this is going to go back into reality capture and then get retextured. So any substance I add back to the map, reality capture is going to check to see if any camera captured that surface, and it'll texture it. So what we have are retextured. Here the vegetation's been removed, the grass has been smoothed out, the little iron balcony has been removed. I've flattened everything. This gets it down to nice, clean lines that can be imported and easily seen without too many pixels or polygons. And I want to wrap this up soon because I want to have time for some questions, but the software that we're using, Unreal, and especially Unreal as it's used in Twinmotion, you can have atmospheric effects, you can have the sun and clouds and rain and weather, and you can orient these things properly. So, for instance, this is properly aligned north-south to the sun where I have it. The background imagery actually is another model derived from satellite imagery. So this is Aster enhanced satellite imagery, creating the mountains in the back. For those of you who are Civil War buffs, this is Signal Knob, which is important for the Battle of Cedar Creek that went on here in Belle Grove. So we have the drone data as the bottom. We have the drone data plus terrestrial photographs on the side. And we end up with this wonderful ability to merge multiple levels of detail into one experience. All right, I'm gonna wrap this up in a second. One of the things that we wanted to do was to replace the architecture that was known from the antebellum time period, so that again, we're putting the people who actually worked at Belle Grove back onto the landscape. And part of what Matt Greer had observed, and he and Erica had published on, were alignments having to do with the burnt house that our projects uncovered in 2019. This house is located in that side yard. And one of the themes in plantation archaeology is viewshed. And it seems like that cabin was under the constant watch of the office store and the manor house through the back door. This was demonstrated on paper by Matt and Erica. Now it is just painfully visible using the 3D modeling. And of course, this can be walked in real time or in VR. All right, so I want to check in with my friend Jeffrey Vadala, see if he's made any progress on getting VR chat to run. Because right now, if you can unmute yourself, Jeffrey, let's find out how you're doing.
Hey there.
Hey.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
All right. One of the things that David and I are working on together is getting these 3D models online so people can explore them and learn about them together. And we are using some social virtual reality apps that will allow people to go online and visit the site. And I was going to give you a quick demonstration, and it's a little bit for me to manage the computer, and I'm putting on the headset here, so we'll see how it goes. Can you still hear me, David?
Yes, we can.
We're using VR chat, and VR chat is a great platform because it allows you to be anyone you want to be. There's an actual robotic form of David, but it allows you to go almost anywhere you would want to go as long as someone makes it. And this is what we've done.
We're not seeing your screen though.
I'm going to get there. And this is what we've done with Belle Grove.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
Can you see anything?
We can. It's flickering, but go ahead and do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It should stop flickering now.
Yep. Excellent. All right. So while you walk around, let me talk for a second. So he's in VR and he is online right now. And this model is being hosted out in the ether. And I actually, on my other computer, our plan was for me to join him, but it got a little complicated to do that, plus Zoom, plus all the other stuff. But we can meet up there. And let's say he is Matthew Greer, and he wants to give a tour of the archaeological site. He can go in there, and I would see him as an avatar. He can be whoever he wants. He can look like the scholarly professor, or, yeah, do you have your selfie cam? Yeah. There we go. So he's his favorite avatar is kind of this skater hipster dude who is very expressive, and we really like that. But he could be any character. If you wanted to give a kid's demonstration of this, he could be a talking banana, which we did the other day. So, and I could see him, follow him around, and you can see as he moves around his head, it's moving in real time, and he's able to experience the landscape. Very good. Why don't we keep you in VR for the moment? And I think it's about time to open up for questions since we are running low on time. It's the last 8 minutes. This is where we are right now with Belle Grove. Our goal was during this pandemic, and especially during the Black Lives Matter movement, we are going to put all our efforts into this Belle Grove project and try and get it up and running by the end of the year so that we can have some cooperative exploration. Or honestly, this is, in the end, we're doing this all for Belle Grove. So we have a board of directors who are also going to oversee how this data is used in the most respectful and educational manner. So that's our goal right now. I would love to open the floor for questions. Did we have any in the chat as we were going? I don't see any.
I'd like to ask a question.
Please, Jason Miller.
Yes, thank you. That was a fantastic talk. Very exciting, both of you.
Thank you.
Congratulations on both, basically excavating both sites. So I'm in the computer science department, and I'm sure we could find some students who'd love to work with your tools. So please contact me. Maybe we can recruit some students for you.
Wonderful.
Also, just as a data science person, I'm wondering whether as you modify the data, like take out plants, is the original data still there? If technology improves 5 years from now, will we be able to reprocess the data?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a problem with big data, as you, I'm sure, are very aware. The idea of having here, let me just go to this. So problem with big data is that when I process these models, like this Teotihuacan feathered serpent pyramid, it can be just millions and millions of polygons. And when we simplify it, we do lose those polygons. So there's two ways of saving that. You can save the original scan before you do any editing, and that's my preference, is just to save one original and then downsample everything and have that as your final version, but keep that original scan. The other thing is you always have the photographs. If this data is generated from photographs, the technology is just getting better. So what you could run only a few hundred photographs before, now you can run thousands, now you can run tens of thousands. As long as the image data stays together, you can always reprocess the data. But yeah, we do have a problem with storing and sharing. That's actually our biggest challenge in doing this online VR chat, is getting the data small enough to be able to be shared and experienced at the same time by two people using very complicated equipment, and not have both computers just freeze up and the internet freeze up. So you got to downsample everything to the point where you do lose data, you lose fidelity. And so eventually you want to keep that original version, because down the road, we're going to be able to host that. We're going to be able to share that online, even if we can't right now. That's a great point. Yeah.
Amy F. has a question. She will need to unmute.
I was taking the class at 1 o'clock called Modern History, and that class went on till 2:30. Anyway, I couldn't get in for the first half of yours. So my question is, is there some way that I can see that at a later date? And is this an actual class or just a one-time lecture?
This is a faculty research forum lecture. So it's just me as a faculty member sharing with the Shepherd community my independent research. So it's just it's a talk, and then there will be another faculty research forum down the road with a different faculty member sharing their research. So
I hope it's not a conflicting time. Can't do two at the same time.
All right, you'll have to check with Ava on that one. But yeah, I am recording this, and so when we're done, we will be posting it, and people will be able to access the recording.
Yes, we will be posting this on the Faculty Research Forum website, which you can access really easily. So if you just have questions about that, you can contact really anyone about it. But if you search Faculty Research Forum on Shepherd's website, you'll find the direct link.
Matt, you turned on your camera. Do you have a question?
I did. I do have a question. I wonder if you have a pretty good estimate of exactly how much time you took, say, developing the full VR landscape for Belle Grove. What's your time commitment there? Like, this is
yeah. So
I'd love to hear an estimate of that. How are you, by the way? Nice to see you.
Wonderful to see you. It's funny, in my other version of this talk, I actually have that line written in, saying the number one question I get is
maybe I just didn't hear it.
So the answer is, of course, with Belle Grove, we were breaking new ground, and so we were testing a lot of new concepts. I can tell you better with Chunchik Meal, because I did the trial and error, and then I found a process that worked, and then I tested it, and I tested the speed. And basically, I can fly, if you were thinking that you were local, you could fly a 250 by 250 meter block in an hour. Then you can process that data by the end of the day. You can clean it the next day, and you can add vegetation and have it up and running in Unreal by Sunday. So if you Friday to Sunday, you could do a 250 meter by 250 meter block of just cleaning the model and maybe adding some plants within a weekend. Now, the more complicated the model, the more time you're going to take. But Chunchik Meal is just a bunch of mouths. So, Matt Omansky.
Yeah, there's been more than one Matt here.
Yeah, great.
Hey, David, great talk. Yeah, I was wondering, of course, Chunchik Meal is ideal for this sort of survey where there's just no coverage. Working farther to the south, like the Peten, where we can't fly drones, how much of this is applicable there? I know LiDAR is ideal. Can you apply some of this down to that sort of setting?
Well, so there are benefits to LiDAR. For those of you who don't know, LiDAR will use lasers, and because the laser point is so small, it'll get through the tiny holes in the foliage, and it can measure the ground surface even in dense jungles. Photogrammetry will not work that way because the sensor needs to literally see the ground, like your eyes see the ground. So Matt's absolutely correct. You cannot use photogrammetry like in the Petén of Guatemala. But if you are, for instance, somebody like our colleague Charles Hulk, who did his dissertation by surveying milpas, open milpas, this would be, you know, if you have an open milpa, this would be the way to go. The other places I think are ideal for this, Cantona, Xochicalco, your places that have pronounced dry season, and a lot of the architecture is like terracing and staircases. But yeah, in terms of the Maya area, I've talked a lot about this with Alexander. He does photogrammetry, but he relies on LiDAR for the Petén. The thing that you want in the LiDAR, though, is to make sure it's backed up with some color data. You want color LiDAR because the LiDAR that is only taking points, the photographs add so much more, where you actually can get a color for each point in the point cloud. So if you're going to go LiDAR, I really recommend the colored LiDAR, which does use a little bit of an RGB camera. We can talk about more of that, but you're absolutely right. This technique is made for places where you can see through the trees. Another question?
I got a question real quick. The host has a question.
Yes.
So you put all this time into this, a lot of intellectual labor, thinking out this and putting this in, creating actually something virtual, but also at the same time real. Have you ever thought about trying to sell what you've created, your models, to like a game developer to help fund future research?
There are some ethical questions about all of that because it's, as a researcher, I have no qualms about scanning something for a publication or an educational research project. But if I were to scan these historical and cultural landscapes and then sell them to, say, you know, for somebody to go in and create mayhem, you know, a lot of bloody killing and things like that, I would lose a lot of control over how the cultural patrimony that really is not mine to sell would be used. So I have no problem consulting with video game developers if they want to make a more culturally sensitive and historically accurate game. I will help them with those types of things. But no, I would probably not just, actually, the folks that did this model behind me, that's SciArc. They make the data, put it out there, and then it's freely available for anyone to do with what they'd like. And there are some ethical debates about that. You know, I could do a lot of things that might be culturally insensitive with 3D models, especially in a violent video game. So I would have to really think about that.
Is this applicable for finding relics and history of the Civil War that is all around Belle Grove?
Yeah, so in terms of finding new things, actually the area around Belle Grove has been walked over for decades, centuries, and metal detectorists have gone over it. And so in some ways, most of the surface features have been noted and recorded. The purpose of this is more to model the landscape so that you can see view sheds and how the cultural landscape was created in this panopticon, as it's called, where you're constantly in a surveillance landscape as an enslaved person. So that's kind of the purpose of modeling this entire landscape, was to get that sense of presence within this surveillance landscape. Detecting new undiscovered features is probably not very likely, although you know, you fly at just the right time when the crops are having just the right amount of stress. You might find some interesting crop marks or things like that anytime you fly a drone.
Thank
you. And at Chunchik Meal, most certainly, we found more stuff in my drone survey than we did in some of our surface walkovers. So in the Maya area, you can actually find new things. Yeah, I was able to find individual metates in the drone imagery. Other questions? Jason, do you are you trying to?
Yeah, I got a question. When you're bringing out this data and exposing sites like the one in Yucatan, is there any? Do you have any reserve on not sharing some of the stuff due to possible opening the door to looters coming in behind you with a treasure map?
Yes and no. The maps of Chunchik Meal have been published. The site exists in between 5 towns, and they all own parts of the archaeological site. It actually rests on 5 different communities' farmlands. It's on bus routes. Everybody knows where it is. You look out the window, and those are the pyramids. So this is not out in the middle, this is not out in the middle of nowhere, unknown. This is a site that has a road going right through it. So everybody knows exactly where all this stuff is. And it's really, the local folks have done a great job. If I was afraid of that, that's a great thing to think about. But in this particular case with Chunchik Meal, I am not that afraid of it, because I know the communities, I know its current disposition, and this would not spark any additional looting. As a matter of fact, this is a good...
Thank you for answering that question.
Yeah, it's a great concern. And as a matter of fact, this drone survey was able to pick up some additional looting that had been done since the last time we were there. It found a depression in one of the structures that was not there when we were last there. So in some ways, this would be good for monitoring. All right. Well, thank you very much. Is this my time? I don't want to take too much time.
Yeah, we should probably end it here, because usually we try to respect people's time to have.
Yeah. Just in case somebody has another class to do. Well, thank you very much, everybody. It was absolutely a delight. I do have, real quick, I would be remiss if I did not do my thank you slide. Oh, maybe it's too late for that. Let's see. PowerPoint presenter camera. There we go. And my thank yous to, hold on. My thank yous to Belle Plantation for the permissions to acquire all of this data and their support in managing all of this. Epic Games, who has given me a grant to work. There's much respect to Epic Games for funding this Belle Grove History Project. And of course, thanks to all the crew members there at Belle Grove and to Shepherd University. Thank you very much, everybody. All right, take care, and I'll see you all out probably on Facebook in a little bit. All right, take care, everybody.